Deep down, she knew the truth before her mind would admit it. The man who marked her as his mate was now giving her sister away at the altar. And something dark waited in the forest, watching Celine with eyes that promised to claim what another had abandoned. Between one breath and the next, Celine Morgan's carefully constructed world began to crumble. The sound of crystal clinking against crystal pulled her attention back to the moment. The sprawling oceanfront estate vibrated with laughter and celebration, the rehearsal dinner for her younger sister's wedding in full swing. Looking back, she should have seen the warning signs, the way the forest behind the estate seemed to hold its breath whenever she glanced toward it, the inexplicable chill that raced down her spine despite the warm summer evening. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was something far more primal, a calling that had begun the moment Cashenvert had returned to Cedar Ridge for the first time in 3 years. If I could have everyone's attention, Cashen's deep voice cut through the ambient noise, silencing conversations as all eyes turned to the imposing figure at the head of the table. Celine's heart skipped painfully in her chest. Unlike the others who listened with rapt attention, she couldn't look at him directly. His voice alone was enough to make her fingers tremble around her champagne flute, the memories flooding back with merciless clarity. The marking under the blood moon. The sacred bond formed in private, away from judging eyes. His promise to choose her in all things. And then, without warning or explanation, his cold order 3 nights later, you'll be leaving in the morning. The guards will escort you across the border. She had spent 2 years in that rival pack's territory. Not as a prisoner, but as something worse, a pawn no one wanted. She wasn't allowed to leave. She wasn't allowed to matter. She was a living ghost marked by another alpha, used only to taunt a mate who had long since let her go. As if summoned by her darkest thoughts, Cashen's gaze found hers across the crowded room, those glacier blue eyes locking onto her for a fraction of a second. Something inside her shifted, the wolf she'd carefully restrained stirring beneath her skin in recognition. Her body moved on instinct, pushing back from the table. "Excuse me," she murmured, setting down her empty glass. "I need some air." No one noticed as she slipped out. Why would they? Tonight was about Olivia and her fiancé, Clay, not about the sister who had disappeared for 2 years only to return 3 months ago, changed in ways no one seemed to acknowledge. Outside, the setting sun melted into the ocean, painting the sky in watercolor hues of orange and pink. The trimmed grass of the estate gave way to towering pines, and Celine hesitated only briefly before stepping into the forest's quieter darkness. She didn't intend to wander far, just enough to escape the suffocating proximity of Cashenvert. Yet the forest felt different tonight, as though the very trees leaned in to watch her passage. The light dimmed rapidly now, shadows stretching across the unfamiliar landscape. Time to head back, Celine whispered to herself, realizing she'd wandered farther than intended. The woods behind the estate stood dark and still, and after 10 minutes of walking aimlessly, the air grew damp and cold against the bare skin of her arms. "Hello? Anyone there?" she called out, straining to listen over the pounding of her own heart. Only silence answered. Her thoughts ventured in circles. God, why was she like this? Still haunted by memories of the alpha who had marked her and then discarded her without explanation? The man now smoothly delivering a toast at her sister's rehearsal dinner as though Celine had never existed to him at all? A twig snapped. Celine froze, her wolf senses immediately on alert. Something moved in the bushes to her right. She whirled around, heart slamming against her ribs. A shadow flickered at the corner of her vision, shifting between the trees, too large for a rabbit, too big for a fox. Then a deep growl rumbled through the clearing. Celine's blood turned to ice. Before she could move, a rabbit burst from the undergrowth, darting across her path. A choked laugh escaped her throat. "Thank God," she whispered, pressing a shaky hand to her chest. She exhaled, turning around, and right in front of her, silent as a ghost, eyes burning into hers, stood an impossibly large white wolf. A scream ripped from Celine's throat, raw and terrified. She stumbled back, fear tightening around her throat. The wolf's eyes, God, those eyes, blue like glaciers, impossibly knowing and alert. The longer she looked into those eyes, the foolishly certain she became that this creature didn't want to hurt her. Celine lowered her hands, a shiver running through her that had nothing to do with fear. Without conscious thought, her hand reached out, moving as if pulled by some unseen force. The wolf extended its head to meet her fingers. The contact jolted through her. Its fur wasn't coarse like she'd expected, but like running her fingers through silk. The wolf leaned into her touch, a sound like pleasure rumbling from deep within its chest. "I'm Celine," she said, feeling simultaneously ridiculous, and like it was the most natural thing in the world to introduce herself to a wolf. "I don't suppose you know the way back to the estate?" To her complete shock, the wolf turned and took several deliberate steps before looking back at her with what she could swear was impatience. "You want me to follow you?" she asked, not expecting a response, just filling the strange silence with words. The wolf made that same imperious head gesture, so human-like that her breath caught. Wondering if this was some bizarre stress hallucination, Celine followed the wolf through the darkening forest. Every time doubt made her steps falter, the wolf turned and made that same commanding motion with its head. After what seemed both too long and not long enough lights appeared through the trees that Celine knew they were approaching the estate. Relief flooded her system as voices drifted through the darkness. "Celine! Celine, where are you?" Cashin's voice, worried and strong, carried above the others. "Here," she called back without thinking. "I'm here." The wolf's entire demeanor changed in an instant. A low growl, sudden and fierce, rumbled from the creature. When Celine turned, the wolf's attention was already fixed on something beyond her, its posture radiating unmistakable hostility. Before she could speak, it turned and loped away, swallowed by darkness between one heartbeat and the next. A strange, hollow feeling opened in Celine's chest as she watched it go, as though something precious had been taken from her. "Celine!" Cashin emerged from between the trees, his tall frame silhouetted against the estate's lights behind him. In 3 long strides, his hands were on her shoulders, his eyes scanning her face. "Are you all right? What were you thinking, wandering into the forest alone at night?" His scent, pine and rain and something uniquely him, washed over her. Celine met his gaze and felt her wolf stir again, more strongly this time. 3 years had changed him, lines etched at the corners of his eyes that hadn't been there before. A new scar bisected his left eyebrow, but those eyes, those impossible blue eyes, remained unchanged. The same eyes she'd just seen in the white wolf. "I'm fine," she managed, pulling away from his touch. "Just needed some space." Cashin's jaw tightened. "These woods aren't safe, especially at night." "I can take care of myself," she replied, more sharply than intended. "I've had plenty of practice, thanks to you." His expression darkened, something ancient and pained flickering across his features. "Celine, don't." She cut him off, stepping back. "Whatever you're about to say, save it. We both know you chose to send me away. Nothing you say now changes that." As the forest held its breath, something unspoken passed between them, a current of electricity, of unfinished business. His gaze dropped to her neck, where beneath the high collar of her dress lay the mark he'd left. The mark that should have bound them together forever. "You don't understand what happened," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "Then make me understand," she challenged, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. Before he could answer, voices called from the direction of the estate. "Did you find her?" "We'll talk later," Cashin promised, his eyes never leaving hers. "No, we won't," Celine replied, brushing past him toward the lights of the estate. There's nothing left to say. But as she walked away, the memory of those wolf's eyes, his eyes, stayed with her. There was something more here, something that didn't make sense. And the wolf in her blood, the one that had recognized its mate even after years of separation, wasn't going to rest until she discovered the truth. Little did she know that in the shadows of the forest edge, two glowing blue eyes watched her return to the estate. The hunt had begun. This time, he wouldn't let her go. The wolf had marked her with his scent, and now Cashin wouldn't be the only predator hunting what he believed was his. Some claims run deeper than mating bonds, and some secrets can kill when finally revealed. Hours later, freshly showered and nestled in bed, Celine rose to close her curtains against the night. A flash of white at the forest's edge caught her eye. The wolf stood at the tree lean, its eyes gleaming in the darkness like twin blue stars. Her breath caught in her throat, the encounter in the woods replaying vividly in her mind. Those eyes, Cashin's eyes. The impossible vision kept her tossing restlessly, skin burning as if with fever, until the need to escape, to feel open air, became overwhelming. The world outside her window was still wrapped in pre-dawn shadows when Celine slipped from bed, pulling a light jacket over her nightgown. The chill brought blessed relief as her feet carried her across the grounds, not toward the woods this time, but instead to the sound of crashing waves at the edge of the property. As though fate demanded it, she discovered stone steps cut into the cliff face, spiraling downward, leading to what appeared to be a sheltered cove. The faint purple light of approaching dawn illuminated the private beach below. Movement caught her eye, a flash of white against the dark sand. The wolf stood at the water's edge, waves lapping at its paws as it gazed out to sea. It hadn't noticed her. Something about its stillness spoke of deep contemplation. Then between one heartbeat and the next, something impossible happened. The wolf's form blurred, rippled, rearranged itself. Where the animal stood now stood a man, tall, powerfully built, and utterly naked in the dim light. Celine blinked rapidly, certain her tired mind was playing tricks. She pressed trembling fingers to her lips. The dream had felt so real, she could almost still feel the warmth of the wolf's fur beneath her palms. The man below turned, the first rays of sun breaking over the horizon outlining the planes of his back and shoulders. For one breathtaking second, his face was revealed in the soft dawn light. He was beautiful in a feral, untamed way that made her heart race. High cheekbones and hollow cheeks, dark hair across his forehead nearly obscuring those piercing blue eyes, the same eyes that had haunted her dreams. Celine froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. It wasn't possible. Shifters, true shifters who could take animal form, were said to be extinct, hunted to the brink centuries ago. Modern werewolves could only partially shift, taking on characteristics of their animal nature while remaining essentially human. Yet what she'd just witnessed defied everything she'd been taught. "Billy?" A sharp voice shattered the moment. Celine ducked back instinctively, heart hammering. The name wasn't hers. Olivia must be looking for someone else. A moment of confusion washed over her before she remembered the estate hosted not just their family, but several members of the wedding party as well. "What are you doing out here?" Olivia asked, pulling her robe tighter. Celine risked another glance toward the beach, but the man, Cashin, had vanished. The cove lay empty save for the relentless wash of waves against the sand. "I couldn't sleep," she managed, hoping her sister wouldn't hear the tremble in her voice. "Well, I'm glad you're safe," said a deeper voice, and Celine turned to find Cashin had joined them, draping an arm across Olivia's shoulders in a protective gesture that made something dark and jealous twist in Celine's stomach. What's worse, as the morning light strengthened, she noticed how comfortable they looked together. Comfortable in a way that suggested, no. Celine crushed the thought. Her sister was marrying Clay. This was merely the alpha exhibiting his natural protective instincts toward pack members. Except Olivia wasn't technically pack. Not yet. Not until the wedding bound their families together through Clay. No matter how hard she tried, Celine couldn't reconcile what she'd seen in the forest with the man standing before her now. This man controlled, composed, every inch the alpha, couldn't possibly be the wild creature from her forest encounter, could he? I need you at your best for the wedding, Cashin said, planting a kiss on Olivia's forehead that sent another jolt of irrational jealousy through Celine. You're right, Olivia replied with a familiarity that made Celine's skin crawl. We should get back inside. As they turned to leave, Celine lingered, her gaze drawn once more to the now empty cove where the wolf had transformed. Had she imagined it all? Was she truly losing her mind? Truth be told, Celine had spent the entire 3 months since her return convincing herself that what Cashin had done, sending her away, breaking their bond, was unforgivable. That his betrayal defined him completely. It was easier that way. Easier than admitting she still felt something for the man who had marked her under the blood moon and then abandoned her without explanation. But now, uncertainty crept in like morning fog. There was something she was missing, a piece of the puzzle that would make sense of the chaos. By the time they reached the main house, the sun had fully risen, bathing the estate in golden light. The day's activities were already beginning, staff moving efficiently to prepare for the rehearsal that afternoon and the wedding the following day. There you are, Clay's voice called out as they entered through the terrace doors. He strode toward them, handsome in a conventional way that had never appealed to Celine. His eyes were only for Olivia, who lit up at the sight of him. I was worried when I woke up and you were gone. Just a morning walk, Olivia replied, stepping into his embrace. Celine was out wandering too. Clay's gaze shifted to Celine, warm but distracted. Everything okay? Before she could answer, Maya Gray, the wedding planner, appeared, tablet in hand. Excuse me, but we need to discuss the final arrangements for tomorrow. What followed was a flurry of activity as they all moved toward the breakfast room where the day's schedule would be reviewed. Celine trailed behind, the sensation of being watched intensifying with every step. She scanned the tree line, searching for a flash of white among the shadows. You're distracted this morning, Cashin's voice startled her as he fell into step beside her. The others had moved ahead, giving them a rare moment alone. Celine's heart fluttered traitorously. Just tired. His gaze was penetrating, as though he could see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. Did you sleep at all after your adventure in the woods? The way he said adventure carried weight, as if he knew exactly what had happened. As if he'd been there. As the forest held its breath, Celine made a decision. She stopped walking, turning to face him directly. I saw something last night, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Something impossible. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Nothing is impossible, Celine. A white wolf, she continued, watching his expression carefully. With blue eyes. For the briefest moment, Cashin's composure cracked. She saw it, a flash of something primal, something wild behind the facade of control. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of the alpha. The woods can play tricks on the mind, he said smoothly. Especially at night. That's not all, Celine pressed, moving closer. Between them, something cracked the careful distance they'd maintained since her return. This morning at the cove. I saw. Cashin. Clay's voice interrupted from the terrace. They need your input on the seating arrangement." The moment shattered. Cashin stepped back, the wall between them rebuilding brick by brick. "We'll continue this conversation later," he said, his voice low and intense. "When we're truly alone." As he walked away, Celine's wolf stirred beneath her skin, recognizing what her human mind still struggled to accept. The scent, the eyes, the powerful presence, there was no doubt. The white wolf and Cashin were one and the same. And, just like that, everything changed. The betrayal that had defined her existence for 3 years took on new dimensions, raising more questions than answers. Why had he let her go if he could track her in wolf form? Why had he never come for her during those 2 lonely years? More importantly, why reveal himself to her now, on the eve of a wedding that would bind their pacts through her sister? As she entered the house, Celine felt the weight of Cashin's gaze following her. The game had changed. The hunt had begun. And this time, she wouldn't be the prey who ran. She would be the hunter who uncovered the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. Behind her, in the shadows of the forest, a pair of ice blue eyes narrowed. The time for secrets was coming to an end. Soon, she would know everything, including the reason he had been forced to let her go. And when that happened, the real battle would begin. Sometimes the deepest betrayals aren't born from hatred, but from desperate love. Celine thought she knew what drove Cashin to abandon her, until the fragments of truth began revealing a sacrifice too terrible to bear. The morning passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Celine moved through it like a ghost, present but disconnected, her mind replaying what she'd witnessed at dawn. The impossible transformation. The man emerging from the wolf. The eyes that couldn't belong to anyone but Cashin. Yet everywhere she turned, there he was, composed, controlled, untouchable, playing the role of supportive alpha with such conviction that she began to doubt her own sanity. As though reading her thoughts, Cashin's gaze continually found hers across crowded rooms. Each time their eyes met, something electric passed between them, a current of recognition, of unfinished business. Her wolf responded instinctively, pushing against her control, drawn to its mate despite 3 years of betrayal and abandonment. By mid-afternoon, Celine needed escape. The bridal luncheon had concluded, and she slipped away while Olivia was distracted with Maya reviewing final details for tomorrow's ceremony. The main house felt suffocating, every corner filled with reminders of what she had lost and what she had never truly had. Without conscious thought, her feet carried her toward the path she'd discovered that morning, the one leading to the hidden cove. Perhaps there, away from prying eyes, she could make sense of the chaos inside her. The stone steps were worn smooth from years of use, spiraling down the cliff face to the sheltered beach below. Waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, the sound almost meditative. Celine kicked off her shoes, letting her toes sink into the cool sand as she approached the water's edge. "I knew you'd come back here." The deep voice behind her sent a shiver of recognition down her spine. Celine didn't turn, didn't need to. Her wolf already knew, had always known, who approached. "This isn't a social visit, Cashin," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need answers." She heard his footsteps in the sand, approaching slowly, deliberately. The predator within him evident in every measured movement. When he finally stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, Celine forced herself to look at him directly. The afternoon sun caught in his dark hair, highlighting strands of silver that hadn't been there 3 years ago. His profile was sharp, aristocratic, but it was his eyes that held her captive. Those impossible blue eyes that had haunted her dreams, wolf and man alike. "What did you see this morning, Celine?" he asked quietly, gaze fixed on the horizon where sea met sky. The tension broke. "You know exactly what I saw," she replied, anger and confusion bubbling to the surface. I saw a wolf become a man. I saw you. A beat later, he turned to face her fully. And what will you do with that knowledge? That depends on what other secrets you're keeping, she said, taking a step toward him. The space between them charged with electricity, with years of unspoken truths. True shifters are supposed to be extinct. Hunted to extinction centuries ago. His laugh was bitter, humorless. And yet, here I stand. Why didn't you tell me? Before. She couldn't finish, the words catching in her throat. Before you marked me. Before you sent me away. Cashin's expression darkened, something ancient and pained flickering across his features. There are things you don't understand, Celine. Things I couldn't tell you then. So tell me now, she demanded, her voice trembling despite her effort to remain composed. I spent 2 years as a prisoner in a rival pack because of you. I deserve to know why. Without warning, he closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. Her breath caught in her throat at the contact, the first time he had touched her since her return. His skin burned against hers, the heat of him seeping into her very bones. Not a prisoner, he corrected, his eyes searching hers. Never that. A protected guest. Celine jerked away from his touch, disbelief and fury washing over her in equal measure. Protected? They treated me like a ghost. Like something to be hidden away and forgotten. Because I ordered them to keep you safe, he growled, the sound rumbling deep in his chest, wolf and man merging in his intensity. To keep you alive. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, responding to his proximity, to the command in his voice. Celine fought against it, against the instinct to submit to her alpha, her mate. Safe from what? She challenged. The moment their eyes locked, something shifted in the atmosphere between them. The air thickened with unspoken truths, with the weight of their shared history. From me, he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. From what I am. Before she could process his words, a sharp voice cut through their isolation. There you are. Olivia called from the top of the stone steps. We've been looking everywhere for you. Cashin stepped back instantly, the vulnerable moment shattered. By the time Olivia reached the bottom of the steps, his mask was firmly back in place, the controlled alpha, the future-in-law, the man who had abandoned Celine without a backward glance. Except she had seen beneath the mask now. Had glimpsed something that made her question everything she thought she knew about his betrayal. The florist is having a meltdown about the centerpieces, Olivia said, breathless from her descent. And Clay is useless with the stuff. Cashin, could you please talk to them? They'll listen to you. The familiarity between them grated on Celine's nerves. There was an ease to their interaction that spoke of more than casual acquaintance. As the wind shifted, Celine caught something in her sister's scent, a trace of Cashin, subtle but unmistakable. Her blood ran cold. No, it couldn't be. With every heartbeat, a new suspicion formed, dark and terrible. Her sister's engagement to Clay. The timing of Cashin's return. The way he hovered protectively around Olivia. Of course, Cashin replied smoothly, his gaze never leaving Celine's face. He saw the moment understanding dawned, watched as horror and betrayal bloomed in her eyes. Celine, Maya needs you too, Olivia added, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling between them. Something about the seating chart for the rehearsal dinner? I'll be there in a minute, Celine managed, her voice hollow. Olivia hesitated, glancing between them with sudden suspicion. Is everything okay? Fine, Cashin answered for both of them, his tone leaving no room for argument. Just catching up. It's been a long time since Celine and I have spoken. Something in his words carried a double meaning, a warning that only Celine could understand. She watched as he guided Olivia back toward the steps, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back in a gesture both protective and possessive. Just like that, everything changed. The fragments of truth began assembling into a pattern too horrific to contemplate. Had Cashin sent her away because of Olivia? Had her own sister somehow come between them? As though sensing her thoughts, Cashin glanced back over his shoulder. For a fleeting moment, the mask slipped again, revealing an anguish so profound it stole her breath. "Not what you think," he mouthed silently, before turning away. Left alone on the beach, Celine's mind spun with possibilities, each more painful than the last. She had spent 3 years believing Cashin's betrayal was born from coldness, from a simple change of heart. Now she faced a far more complex truth, one that suggested his actions might have been driven by something deeper, perhaps even something noble. Her wolf pressed forward, demanding she follow, demanding answers. The bond, dormant for so long, pulsed between them, raw, unstable, consuming. As she climbed the stone steps back to the estate, a new determination formed within her. No more hiding. No more half-truths. Before this wedding took place, she would uncover exactly what had happened 3 years ago and why Cashin had chosen to sacrifice what they had. The shadows lengthened as afternoon slid toward evening. From the forest's edge, a pair of unfamiliar eyes tracked Celine's progress up the cliff. Not Cashin's ice-blue gaze, but something darker, hungrier. Something that had followed the scent of a marked female across pack boundaries. The white wolf wasn't the only predator who had claimed Celine. And as the sun began its descent, the true danger crept closer, drawn by the scent of a bond about to be reclaimed. Cashin wasn't the only one with secrets. And some secrets killed when finally revealed. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones others tell us, but the ones we tell ourselves. And as the stranger's scent mingled with Cashin's in the night air, Celine realized her alpha hadn't abandoned her to save himself. He'd sacrificed her to save someone she loved. The rehearsal dinner stretched endlessly, a surreal performance where everyone played their assigned roles to perfection. Everyone except Celine, who sat at the far end of the long table, watching the interaction between Cashin and her sister with new, suspicious eyes. The candlelight cast shifting shadows across faces, transforming the familiar into something sinister. From her vantage point, Celine could observe without being observed, the advantage of being forgotten in the excitement surrounding the bride-to-be. Olivia glowed with happiness, her laughter spilling like champagne as she leaned into Clay's side. Yet Celine couldn't help noticing how often her sister's gaze drifted to Cashin, seeking his approval, his reassurance. Something intimate and knowing passed between them with each glance, something that made Celine's stomach twist with dread. More concerning still was the subtle protective stance Cashin maintained throughout the evening. He'd positioned himself between Olivia and the large windows overlooking the forest, his posture relaxed to casual observers, but unmistakably vigilant to anyone with wolf blood. He was guarding her. As the night wore on, Celine's wolf prowled restlessly beneath her skin, sensing danger beyond the walls. Twice she caught Cashin scanning the tree line, nostrils flaring subtly as he tested the air. Whatever or whoever he sought remained hidden in the darkness, but his tension was palpable to her heightened senses. When dinner concluded and guests began to disperse, Celine slipped away to the terrace. The night air caressed her flushed skin, a welcome relief from the suffocating tension indoors. Stars scattered across the velvet sky, and the waxing moon cast silver light across the estate grounds. Before she could even take a full breath, a hand closed around her wrist, warm and insistent. She didn't need to turn to know who stood behind her. "We need to talk," Cashin said, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Now." Away from prying eyes. Celine pulled her arm free, turning to face him with carefully constructed composure. More secrets, Cashin? Haven't we had enough of those? His jaw tightened, the muscle there jumping with tension. There's someone here who shouldn't be. Someone who's been tracking you. A chill that had nothing to do with the night air raced down her spine. What are you talking about? Not here, he insisted, glancing toward the windows where guests still mingled inside. Meet me at the cove in 20 minutes. Come alone. Before she could protest, he melted back into the shadows, leaving her with the unsettling certainty that whatever he feared was far worse than she'd imagined. 20 minutes stretched into an eternity as Celine made her excuses and changed into practical clothing, dark jeans and a lightweight sweater, sturdy boots replacing her formal heels. Every instinct screamed danger, yet she found herself drawn inexorably toward the confrontation Cashin promised. The path to the cove was transformed in darkness, shadows dancing between ancient trees as moonlight filtered through the canopy. The forest held its breath around her, watchful and waiting. Celine's heightened senses registered a new scent on the breeze, unfamiliar, masculine, dangerous. Not Cashin. Someone else. Someone who had no right to be in these woods. Her wolf stirred forcefully, pushing against her human restraint. The scent triggered something primal, recognition and revulsion simultaneously. She had encountered the scent before, during those long years of exile. The revelation hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Someone from the rival pack had followed her here. Celine quickened her pace, no longer concerned with stealth. The stone steps appeared ahead, and she descended them rapidly, heart pounding in her chest. The cove spread before her, a silver-blue painting under moonlight. Waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, the sound almost drowning out her racing thoughts. Cashin waited at the water's edge, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sea. As she approached, he turned, tension evident in every line of his powerful frame. "You're being hunted," he said without preamble, the bluntness of his words cutting through the night. "By someone from Blackthorn Pack," she replied, confirming what she'd already deduced. "I recognized the scent." Surprise flickered across his features, quickly replaced by grim satisfaction. "You've grown stronger than I expected." "I had to," she said simply, the words carrying the weight of 3 years' hardship. "When did you notice him?" 2 days ago, Cashin admitted, taking a step closer. "His scent has been circling the property, testing boundaries. Tonight he came closer." Too close. The implication hung between them, unspoken but understood. The intruder had breached territory that an alpha like Cashin considered inviolable, especially with his pack gathered for celebration. "Why would anyone from Blackthorn follow me here?" Celine asked, though a terrible suspicion had already begun forming in her mind. "You said they were keeping me safe. Protected." Moonlight silvered Cashin's features as he regarded her, the struggle evident in his expression. He was weighing truth against protection, as he had done 3 years ago. "Not everyone agreed with the arrangement," he said finally. "Not everyone honored it." "What arrangement?" she demanded, closing the distance between them. "Stop speaking in riddles, Cashin. I deserve the truth." The space between them charged with electricity, with years of unspoken words. Her proximity seemed to break something in him, the careful control he maintained shattered. "I made a deal," he growled, the words tearing from him like physical pain. "Your safety for my brother's life." The confession hung in the night air between them, devastating in its simplicity. Celine staggered back as though struck. "Your brother," she whispered. "Aiden?" "But he was dying," Cashin finished, raw grief etching lines into his face. "A rare bloodline disease spreading rapidly through the Ironclaw line. The Blackthorn Alpha had a cure. His price was you." The world tilted beneath Celine's feet as pieces of the puzzle snapped violently into place. 3 years of hatred, of believing herself worthless, discarded, all built upon a foundation of misunderstanding. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the crashing waves. "Would you have gone willingly?" he countered, his eyes piercing in the darkness. "If I'd asked you to sacrifice our bond, our future, to save my brother, would you have agreed?" The answer lodged in her throat, unspoken because they both knew the truth. She would have sacrificed anything for Cashin, even herself. "The Blackthorn Alpha promised you would be treated as honored kin," Cashin continued, the words spilling out now that the dam had broken. "But when the cure failed months later, when Aiden died despite everything, the alliance fractured. I lost all leverage to ensure your treatment, your return." Her heart constricted painfully in her chest. "So you just left me there?" "For 2 years. I never stopped trying to get you back," he snarled, pain and frustration emanating from him in waves. "Why do you think I agreed to this cursed alliance through Clay and Olivia? It was the only way to bring you home without starting a war that would destroy both packs." As the wind shifted, a new scent touched Celine's senses, the same dangerous, unknown presence from the forest, but closer now. Much closer. Cashin tensed beside her, his body coiling with predatory awareness. "He's here," he whispered, shifting subtly to place himself between Celine and the stone steps leading down to the cove. "Who?" she demanded, though dread coiled in her stomach like a poisonous serpent. "Victor Blackthorn," Cashin replied, his voice dropping to a rumble that was more wolf than man. "The Alpha's son. The one who's been obsessed with you since the moment you arrived in their territory." Before Celine could process this new revelation, a silhouette appeared at the top of the stone steps, tall, menacing, radiating power and malice in equal measure. "How touching," a smooth voice called down, the accent distinctly foreign. "The star-crossed mates reunite at last. I do hate to interrupt, but I've come to reclaim what belongs to me." As the moonlight fell across the newcomer's face, revealing cruel features and hungry eyes, Celine realized the true danger had never been Cashin's secrets. It was what those secrets had awakened in others. The real predator had finally revealed himself. And he had no intention of leaving without her. The most terrifying moment isn't when you face your enemy, it's when you realize the man you've hated for years would tear the world apart to keep you safe, while the one who treated you with kindness plans to destroy everything you love. Victor Blackthorn descended the stone steps with predatory grace, each movement calculated and fluid. Moonlight caught in his platinum hair, creating an ethereal halo that belied the darkness in his amber eyes. He was beautiful in the way that deadly things often are, a viper coiled to strike. "You're trespassing," Cashin growled, his body shifting subtly between Celine and the newcomer. The alpha command in his voice resonated through the cove, powerful enough to make lesser wolves submit instantly. Victor merely smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Am I? I've come to escort my betrothed home. Hardly trespassing when I'm retrieving what belongs to me." The word betrothed hit Celine like a physical blow. She stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder with Cashin, refusing to be spoken about as property. "I belong to no one," she stated, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "Least of all you." Victor's laugh was soft, almost gentle, the same laugh that had often accompanied his rare kindnesses during her captivity. Now, hearing it in this context, she recognized it for what it truly was, the sound of a predator toying with prey. "Oh, but you do," he countered, reaching the bottom step. "The moment my father negotiated your transfer to our territory, your fate was sealed. The fact that this..." His lip curled as he glanced at Cashin. "This half-breed failed to mention the true terms of our arrangement hardly invalidates them." Celine's gaze snapped to Cashin, whose expression had hardened into something dangerous. What is he talking about? What terms? The tension broke. Cashin's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. The cure for Aiden came with another condition, one I never agreed to. Victor was to have you as his mate once the alliance was secured. A minor detail you conveniently forgot to share with your precious Celine, Victor added, taking another step forward. The scent of him, winter pine and smoke, carried on the breeze, making Celine's wolf recoil in instinctive rejection. But my father and I understood the arrangement perfectly. Moonlight reflected off the water, casting eerie, shifting patterns across the sand. The crash of waves provided a rhythmic backdrop to the deadly confrontation unfolding. Is that why you've come? Celine demanded, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. To enforce this arrangement I never consented to? Partially, Victor admitted, his gaze never leaving her face. There was something in his expression, something beyond arrogance or entitlement, that sent chills racing down her spine. Obsession. Raw and consuming, but also because you carry something that belongs to my line. Her heart stuttered painfully in her chest. What are you talking about? The cure wasn't merely medicine, Cashin interjected, his voice tight with controlled rage. It was blood magic. Ancient and forbidden, a transfusion from the Blackthorn bloodline to save Aiden from the disease killing our line. Victor's smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp for his human form. Very good, half-breed. Not as ignorant as you appear. The cure failed, Celine said, confusion evident in her voice. Aiden died despite everything. Did he? Victor asked softly. The question hung in the night air, heavy with implication. The space between one heartbeat and the next stretched into eternity as the truth dawned on her. He's alive, she whispered, turning to Cashin with accusation burning in her eyes. Your brother is alive. Guilt flashed across Cashin's features, quickly replaced by defiance. He survived, yes. But at what cost? The blood magic changed him, twisted him into something I barely recognize. Something unstable and dangerous. And beautiful, Victor added with disturbing reverence. A true hybrid of bloodlines. The first in centuries. What does this have to do with me? Celine demanded, though dread pooled in her stomach as the pieces aligned with terrible clarity. Victor's amber eyes gleamed in the moonlight as he took another step toward her. The ritual wasn't complete. My father understood the ancient texts better than anyone knew that for the bloodlines to truly merge, to create power beyond imagining, we needed a vessel. A female from the Heir claw line, marked by their alpha, carrying the potential for new life. The implication struck Celine with the force of a physical blow. You want me to bear a child of mixed bloodlines? Not just any child, Victor corrected, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. The first true alpha in 10 generations, born of 3 ancient lines. Blackthorn, Ironclaw, and yours the last living descendant of the Moonstone line, though you never knew it. Celine felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Her mother had died when she was young, taking any knowledge of her lineage with her. She had always assumed her blood was ordinary, unremarkable. You're lying, she hissed, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Am I? Victor challenged. Why do you think Cashin chose you as his mate? Why, out of all the females in his territory, did he select the orphaned wolf with no pack ties? He laughed softly at her evident shock. He knew exactly who you were. What you are. Her gaze snapped to Cashin, searching his face for denial, for reassurance that this was merely another of Victor's manipulations. But the guilt in his eyes told a different story. Is it true? She asked, her voice barely audible above the crashing waves. Did you choose me because of my bloodline? The air thickened with tension as Cashin struggled visibly with his answer. I chose you because the moon goddess revealed you as my true mate, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. But yes, I knew of your heritage. Your mother was the last Moonstone Alpha driven into hiding during the Purge. She entrusted you to me on her deathbed. Betrayal, fresh and searing, bloomed in Celine's chest. More secrets, she whispered, taking a step back from both men. My entire life has been built on lies. Not lies, Cashin argued, reaching for her with desperate intensity. Protection. Your bloodline makes you a target for those who would use your power for their own ends. Like you did, she challenged, the words sharp as knives. Victor's laughter cut through their exchange, cold and triumphant. How quickly the mighty Alpha falls from his pedestal. Did you think she would forgive your betrayal so easily? You sent her away. I gave her purpose, position, respect. You kept me as a glorified prisoner, Celine countered, turning her fury on Victor. Used me as a pawn in your father's games. I protected you from those who would have taken by force what I asked for respectfully, Victor replied, his tone hardening. Many in my pack wanted to claim you immediately to complete the ritual without delay. It was I who insisted we wait, who argued for your consent. His words carried a disturbing ring of truth. During her time with Blackthorn Pack, Victor had been her unlikely defender, intervening when others treated her with disrespect or cruelty. And now, she asked, already knowing the answer. Now time grows short, he said, any pretense of gentleness dropping from his tone. My father weakens, the magic sustaining him fades. We need the ritual completed before the next blood moon, 3 nights from now. The implications crystallized with horrifying clarity. The wedding. Clay and Olivia's union. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was calculated to bring both packs together, to lower defenses, to create the perfect opportunity for Victor to reclaim what he considered his. You're not taking her anywhere, Cashin snarled, his control slipping as his eyes flashed electric blue in the darkness. The air around him shimmered with power as the wolf within pushed against his human form. Victor remained unruffled, his amber eyes gleaming with anticipation. I was hoping you'd say that. From beneath his jacket, he withdrew a vial of dark liquid that seemed to absorb the moonlight around it. Do you know what this is, half-breed? Cashin froze, recognition and fear washing over his features. Blood magic. Forbidden. The same ritual that saved your brother, Victor confirmed, his smile growing cruel. Except this variant doesn't heal, it binds. 1 drop on her skin, and Celine's will becomes mine. Her consent becomes irrelevant. The threat hung in the air between them, vile and explicit. Before either could react, Victor hurled the vial toward Celine with preternatural speed. Time slowed. Cashin launched himself forward, a blur of movement as he intercepted the vial midair. Glass shattered against his outstretched palm, dark liquid splashing across his skin. He roared in agony as the blood magic burned into him, dropping to his knees on the sand. Cashin! Celine screamed, rushing to his side as he convulsed, fighting the magic trying to claim him. Victor's laugh echoed through the cove, delighted and cruel. Even better. The mighty Alpha, bound to my will. Command him to release you, and he'll have no choice but to obey. Sand crunched beneath Victor's boots as he approached the fallen Alpha. I'd hoped to avoid unnecessary violence, but this is far more entertaining. Now, Cashin Vare, you will. His command died in his throat as Cashin's head snapped up, eyes blazing not with submission, but with feral rage. The air around him crackled with power as his form blurred, bones cracking, skin rippling. Where the man had knelt, the enormous white wolf now rose, shaking glass fragments from its fur. Victor stumbled back, shock replacing triumph. Impossible, he whispered. The binding, no wolf can resist it. Celine watched in awe as Cashin advanced on Victor, moonlight gleaming on his white fur. Something unprecedented was happening, something that defied the ancient magic Victor had wielded so confidently. The truth hit her with stunning clarity. No ordinary wolf can resist it, she corrected, understanding blooming within her. But he's not ordinary, is he? He's a true shifter. The blood magic has no hold over what cannot be bound. Fear flashed across Victor's features for the first time as he backed toward the stone steps. This changes nothing, he hissed. I'll return with reinforcements. The ritual will be completed. His gaze found Celine's, intense and possessive. You're mine. By right, by blood, by destiny. As Cashin lunged, Victor's form blurred into motion, inhumanly fast as he raced up the stone steps and disappeared into the darkness. The white wolf made to follow, a growl building in his chest, but collapsed instead, tremors racking his powerful frame. Cashin! Celine rushed to his side, dropping to her knees beside him. The wolf's blue eyes found hers, pain and determination warring in their depths. Beneath her palms, his fur began to shimmer, the transformation reversing itself with agonizing slowness. Man replaced wolf, Cashin's naked form materializing on the cool sand. Blood seeped from the cuts where glass had embedded in his palm, mixed with the dark residue of Victor's spell. Why, she whispered, cradling his head in her lap. Why did you intercept it? After everything that's happened between us. His laugh was weak, pained, but genuine. Because I never stopped choosing you, he said, his voice rough with exertion. I just didn't know how to choose myself, too. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and transformative. The hatred she'd nursed for 3 years began to crack, revealing something far more complex underneath, a love tested by impossible choices, by sacrifice, by forces neither of them fully understood. As the moon watched from above, Celine made her own choice. She lowered her lips to his, tasting blood and salt and truth in a kiss that defied 3 years of separation. The dormant bond between them flared to life, raw and unstable and consuming. But even as their lips met, even as something broken began to heal, she knew Victor's threat wasn't empty. He would return. And next time, he wouldn't come alone. The war for her bloodline, for her future, for her very self had only just begun. Some wounds heal with time, but others carve themselves so deeply into the soul that they become part of who we are. And as dawn approached, Celine understood that loving Cashin wasn't about forgetting his betrayal, but about choosing him despite knowing he might break her again. They returned to the estate in silence, the weight of Victor's threats hanging between them. Cashin moved with barely concealed pain, the residual effects of the blood magic still burning through his veins. Celine supported him, her arm around his waist, her wolf hyper-aware of his scent, his proximity, the heat radiating from his skin. The main house loomed ahead, windows glowing with warm light. The rehearsal party had continued in their absence, music and laughter spilling into the night. A celebration oblivious to the danger gathering at its borders. We can't tell them, Cashin said as they paused at the edge of the garden. Not yet. Not until we have a plan. Celine studied his profile in the moonlight, seeing both the familiar and the foreign in the man she'd once pledged herself to. Your brother, she said quietly. You need to tell me everything about Aiden, about what really happened after the ritual. Pain flickered across his features, deeper than physical. He's not the same. The blackthorn blood, it changed him, made him unstable, dangerous. Is that why you haven't mentioned him since I returned? Why no one speaks his name? Cashin's jaw tightened. He's sequestered in the North Territory, for his safety and for others. The shifts between forms have become unpredictable, violent. Sometimes he's not himself. The revelation hung in the night air between them, another piece of the complex puzzle they were assembling. Celine processed this new information, her mind racing with implications. "And Clay?" she asked suddenly. "Where does he fit into all this?" A shadow passed over Cashin's expression. Clay is Aiden's bond brother, sworn to protect the pack should anything happen to me or Aiden. His marriage to Olivia was meant to strengthen our alliance, to give us additional protection against Blackthorn's inevitable betrayal. The pieces clicked together with disturbing clarity. "You used my sister," Celine said, the accusation sharp. "I protected your sister," he countered, voice tight with conviction. "Victor would have taken her too, if he'd known of your connection. The marriage to Clay places her under pack protection, protection that extends to her blood relatives, including me, especially you." The answer should have comforted her, but instead it raised more questions. "And what about us?" she asked, the words barely audible. "What happens to our bond now?" Cashin's gaze dropped to her neck, where beneath her clothing lay the mark he'd placed years ago, a mark that had never faded despite time and distance. "That's for you to decide," he said finally. "I gave up any right to make claims on you the day I sent you away." The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. This was not the commanding alpha who had ordered her exile without explanation. This was a man torn apart by impossible choices, bearing the weight of decisions that had protected many but wounded the one he'd sworn to cherish above all others. Before she could respond, the terrace doors burst open. Olivia stood framed in the light, eyes frantically scanning the darkness until they landed on Celine and Cashin. "Where have you been?" she demanded, rushing down the garden steps. "People have been looking everywhere for you." Celine felt Cashin tense beside her, his body instinctively shifting to shield her from view. The protective gesture wasn't lost on Olivia, whose gaze darted between them with growing suspicion. "We needed to discuss some things," Celine said carefully. "Pack business." Olivia's expression hardened, something vulnerable and hurt flashing in her eyes. "Pack business," she repeated, the words hollow. "Of course. Always secrets with you too." The accusation landed with surprising force. Celine had never considered how her sister might have perceived the relationship between her and Cashin, had never thought Olivia might have felt excluded, overlooked. "It's nothing that concerns the wedding," Cashin assured her, his voice slipping into the smooth, authoritative tone he used when managing pack affairs. "Everything is proceeding as planned." "Is it?" Olivia challenged, uncharacteristic heat in her words. "Because Clay's been acting strange all evening. Maya says the ceremony space has been compromised, and now I find you two sneaking around in the dark like..." She broke off, emotion choking her words. Celine stepped forward, reaching for her sister's hand. "Olivia, I promise you, nothing is going to ruin your wedding. We'll make sure of it." The moment their fingers touched, Celine's wolf recoiled violently. A foreign scent clung to Olivia's skin, faint but unmistakable. Victor's scent. Her reaction must have shown on her face, because Olivia jerked her hand away, wrapping her arms protectively around herself. "What?" she demanded. "What is it?" Cashin had noticed it too. He moved with preternatural speed, placing himself between the sisters. "When did you speak with him?" he growled, all pretense of casualness evaporating. Confusion and fear crossed Olivia's features. "Speak with who? What are you talking about?" "Victor Blackthorn," Celine said, her heart racing as implications cascaded through her mind. "You've been in contact with him." Olivia's face drained of color. "How do you?" She stopped, catching herself, but it was too late. The admission hung in the air between them. "How long?" Cashin demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. 3 months, Olivia whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "Since Celine came back." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Celine staggered back, disbelief washing over her in waves. My own sister, she breathed. You've been working with him this entire time? It's not what you think. Olivia protested, desperation edging her voice. He came to me after you returned, said he could help Clay's family, free them from debt. All he wanted was information about the wedding, about pack movements. And you believed him? Cashin snarled, fury radiating from him in palpable waves. You invited a serpent into your home, endangered everyone you claimed to love? Olivia's tears spilled over. He helped me, when no one else would. Do you have any idea what it's like living in Celine's shadow? Always the afterthought, the consolation prize. She turned to Celine, years of resentment burning in her gaze. You disappeared for 2 years, and all anyone could talk about was when you might return. Even my own wedding has become about you. The accusation landed with brutal force. Celine had never considered how her absence and subsequent return might have affected her sister. Had never thought about the burden of being left behind, of living with questions that had no answers. Olivia, she said softly, reaching for her sister despite the betrayal still raw in her chest. What exactly did Victor ask you to do? Guilt flashed across Olivia's tear-streaked face. He wanted to know when you would be alone, when the pack defenses would be weakest. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He asked me to open the boundary wards tonight, after the rehearsal dinner. Said it was just so he could speak with you privately. Ice flooded Celine's veins. And did you? She asked, already knowing the answer. Olivia nodded, a small, miserable movement. An hour ago. I never thought he would hurt anyone. Cashin cursed violently, spinning toward the house. We need to evacuate. Now. Before. His words died as a piercing howl cut through the night, followed by another, then a chorus. War howls, coming from the northern border of the territory. Too late, he whispered, eyes flashing blue with barely contained rage. They're already here. The sound of breaking glass and shouting erupted from the main house. Guests flooded onto the terrace, confusion and fear evident in their panicked movements. Clay appeared at the top of the steps, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Blackthorn pack, he called down, his voice tight with controlled panic. At least 20. They've breached the main gate. Celine's gaze locked with Cashin's, understanding passing between them without words. Victor hadn't waited. The blood magic's failure had forced his hand, pushing him to direct action. Get everyone to the safe room, Cashin ordered, already moving toward the house. Initiate emergency protocols. Olivia stood frozen, horror etched across her features as the consequences of her actions became clear. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know this would happen. Celine grasped her sister's shoulders, forcing Olivia to meet her gaze. Listen to me. I understand why you did it. But right now, I need you to help Clay evacuate the guests. Can you do that? Determination replaced guilt in Olivia's eyes. She nodded once, sharply, before turning to race up the stairs toward her fiancé. As she disappeared into the chaos, Cashin caught Celine's arm. You need to leave, he said, his voice brooking no argument. Victor wants you. If you're gone, he has no reason to continue the attack. I'm not running, she replied, steel in her tone. Not again. Not from him, and not from you. Their gazes locked, a battle of wills as fierce as any physical confrontation. In the distance, more howls rose into the night, closer now. The sound of fighting grew louder, snarls, screams, the unmistakable sounds of wolves in combat. I can't lose you again, Cashin said, raw vulnerability cracking through his alpha facade. Not when I've just found you. The confession stripped away the last of Celine's resistance. She stepped into him, hands framing his face, forcing him to see the truth in her eyes. You won't lose me, but I won't hide while others fight my battles. Not anymore. Something shifted in his expression, pride warring with fear, love with protective instinct. Finally, he nodded, acceptance settling over his features. "Then we fight together," he said, his hand covering hers where it rested against his cheek. "As equals, as mates." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning, with promise, with a future neither had dared imagine possible just hours before. Celine's wolf surged in response, recognizing its other half, reaching for the bond that had never truly broken. A crash from inside the house shattered the moment. Reality rushed back with brutal force. They were under attack, outmanned and unprepared. "I need to shift," Cashin said, already pulling away. "In wolf form, I'm stronger, faster." Celine nodded, understanding flowing between them. "Go. I'll help coordinate the evacuation, then join you." He hesitated, something desperate and fierce in his gaze. Then, with a swiftness that stole her breath, he pulled her against him, his mouth capturing hers in a kiss that burned with all the words they hadn't said, all the years they'd lost. When they broke apart, his eyes glowed with preternatural blue fire. "Find me," he whispered against her lips. "When this is over, find me." Before she could respond, he was gone, racing toward the tree line where his transformation would be hidden from human eyes. Celine watched him disappear into darkness, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination. A scream from the house pulled her attention back to the immediate crisis. She turned, racing up the steps toward the chaos, her mind already formulating a plan. Victor wanted her, believed she was key to some ancient ritual that would solidify his power. She could use that, turn his obsession against him. As Celine entered the fray, chaos surrounding her on all sides, one certainty crystallized in her mind. She would no longer be anyone's pawn. Not Victor's. Not Cashin's. Not even her own pack's. For the first time since receiving her mate's mark, Celine embraced the full power of what she was, not just a wolf, not just a mate, but the last heir to the Moonstone line. Whatever that meant, whatever power it granted her, she would claim it now. The hunt had begun, but this time she was both predator and prey. And as the night exploded into violence around her, Celine made a silent vow that when dawn broke, she would be the one deciding her fate, not the men who thought they owned her destiny. They say true power isn't revealed in moments of peace, but in the crucible of impossible choices, and as Victor's claws dug into her throat, Celine realized that surrendering to save those she loved wasn't weakness, but the most profound strength she'd ever known. Chaos had consumed the estate, transforming the elegant wedding venue into a battlefield. Broken glass glittered like diamonds across marble floors, furniture lay splintered and overturned, and the metallic scent of blood hung thick in the air. Blackthorn wolves prowled through the main house, their amber eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction as they herded captive guests toward the grand ballroom. Celine moved silently through the shadows, having separated from the main evacuation group to draw attention away from the fleeing humans. Her wolf senses heightened to painful acuity as adrenaline coursed through her veins. Every sound, every scent told a story, the rapid heartbeats of frightened pack members, the foreign musk of blackthorn intruders, and, somewhere distant, the thunderous growls of wolves in combat. Cashin was out there, fighting to protect what was his. The knowledge both terrified and strengthened her. A scream from the direction of the ballroom pulled her attention sharply back to the immediate crisis. She recognized that voice, Olivia. Guilt and sisterly instinct warred within Celine. Olivia had betrayed them, had given Victor access to the estate, but she was still her sister. Still Puck. Still family. Without hesitation, Celine changed course, slipping through servant passages toward the grand ballroom. As she approached, voices grew clearer, one in particular standing out with chilling authority. "Where is she?" Victor's smooth, accented voice carried through the partially open doors. "I know she hasn't fled. My wolves would have caught her scent." "I don't know," Olivia's response came, trembling but defiant. "And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Not now that I see what you really are." The sound of a sharp slap echoed through the room, followed by gasps from the assembled hostages. Celine's blood boiled, her wolf surging against her control, demanding retribution for the assault on Pac. "Your usefulness has ended," Victor said coldly. "I had hoped to spare you, given your assistance, but your sister's stubbornness leaves me no choice. Perhaps her cooperation will improve when she sees what happens to those who defy me." The air thickened with tension as Celine reached the ballroom doors. Through the narrow gap, she could see Victor standing center stage, immaculate despite the violence around him. He held Olivia by the throat, her feet barely touching the ground as she struggled for breath. Behind them, at least 30 wedding guests huddled in terrified clusters, guarded by blackthorn wolves in half-shifted forms, claws extended, teeth elongated, but still bipedal. Clay lay unconscious near the doors, blood pooling beneath his head. Maya and several other humans had been separated from the werewolves, their confusion and terror palpable even from a distance. They had no idea why this was happening, why their friend's wedding had turned into a nightmare. Celine assessed the situation with the cold clarity of desperation. Too many hostages. Too many enemy wolves. No sign of Cashin or the other Ironclaw fighters. Whatever was happening outside had drawn the bulk of their defensive forces away from the house. Victor had planned this perfectly, isolating her from her protectors, threatening those she loved, forcing her hand. As if sensing her thoughts, Victor tightened his grip on Olivia's throat. "I grow impatient," he announced to the room at large. "Celine Morgan has 1 minute to present herself, or her sister dies. After that, we'll move on to the humans." One by one, time stood still as Celine weighed her options. There were none. Not really. Only the illusion of choice when the outcome was predetermined. With every heartbeat, her resolve strengthened. She had spent 3 years as a pawn, moved across the board by forces beyond her control. Victor thought he was forcing her hand once again. He didn't understand that by choosing to surrender, she was reclaiming the power he thought he held over her. Celine pushed the ballroom doors wide, stepping into the light with her head held high. "Let her go," she commanded, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "I'm the one you want." Victor's smile was triumphant as he released Olivia, who crumpled to the floor gasping for breath. "The lost moonstone heir returns," he purred, satisfaction evident in every line of his body. "How noble of you to sacrifice yourself." "This isn't sacrifice," Celine replied, moving steadily forward. With each step, she felt something shifting within her, the dormant power of her bloodline stirring to life. "It's calculation. You need me alive for your ritual. These people are nothing to you." His amber eyes narrowed, assessing her with new interest. "You've changed," he observed. "The frightened little wolf I knew would never have shown such backbone." "That wolf died the day Cashin sent her away," Celine said, coming to a stop several feet from Victor. "What stands before you now is something else entirely." Around them, the blackthorn wolves shifted uneasily, sensing the subtle change in the atmosphere. Something about Celine's presence had altered, an energy radiating from her that hadn't been there before. Even Victor seemed momentarily unsettled. "Kneel," he commanded, his voice layered with alpha authority, a tone that would force submission from any wolf of lesser rank. Celine merely smiled, the expression cold and dangerous. "No." Confusion flickered across Victor's features, quickly replaced by rage. "You will obey me," he snarled, stepping forward to grasp her throat as he had Olivia's. "Or watch Everyone you love died screaming. His fingers closed around her neck, claws extending to prick the delicate skin there. But as they made contact with the claiming mark Cashin had left years ago, something unprecedented happened. Power surged between them, not from Victor to Celine, but the reverse. A blinding white light erupted from the point of contact, throwing Victor backward with tremendous force. He crashed into the grand piano, the instrument splintering beneath the impact. Gasps and cries of shock echoed through the ballroom as Celine stood unmoved, a faint silvery glow emanating from her skin. The mark on her neck burned with cold fire, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "What are you?" Victor whispered, genuine fear crossing his features for the first time. Before Celine could respond, the ballroom windows shattered inward as an enormous white wolf launched through the glass. Cashin landed in a shower of crystalline shards, his fur matted with blood, some his, most not. Behind him poured Ironclaw fighters, their coordinated attack catching the Blackthorn guards momentarily off balance. The room erupted into chaos as werewolves clashed in vicious combat. Humans screamed, seeking shelter beneath overturned furniture. In the confusion, Olivia dragged herself to Clay's unconscious form, attempting to shield him with her body. Despite the mayhem surrounding them, Celine's focus remained locked on Victor, who had regained his footing and now circled her warily. "You can't fight destiny," he said, his voice taking on an almost reverent quality despite the circumstances. "The ritual must be completed. Our bloodlines joined. It was foretold centuries ago." "I make my own destiny," Celine replied, feeling the strange new power coursing through her veins. The dormant Moonstone heritage, awakened by threat and necessity. Victor laughed, the sound edged with madness. "Then I'll take what I need by force." From inside his jacket, he withdrew another vial of the dark liquid, more of the forbidden blood magic. "This variant doesn't require your consent, only your blood mixed with mine." Before she could react, Victor hurled the vial at her feet. It shattered, dark liquid splashing across the marble floor, immediately beginning to bubble and smoke like acid eating through stone. The fumes rose rapidly, wrapping around Celine's legs, climbing higher with unnatural speed. Wherever they touched, her skin burned with agonizing cold. She tried to move, but found herself frozen, the magic rooting her in place as it began seeping into her pores. "Your blood calls to mine," Victor said, advancing steadily as he drew a curved blade from his belt. "The last moonstone. The last blackthorn. Together, we will create a line more powerful than any that came before." Through the haze of pain surrounding her, Celine sought Cashin. The white wolf was fighting his way toward her, tearing through blackthorn wolves with desperate fury. Their eyes met across the chaos, blue to brown, wolf to human, mate to mate. In that glance passed a lifetime of regret, of longing, of promises broken and renewed. "Find me," he had said before they parted. "When this is over, find me." The memory ignited something within her, not just the dormant power of her bloodline, but something deeper. The bond between them had never truly broken, merely stretched thin by distance and betrayal. Now it flared to life, pulsing between them like a physical tether. As Victor raised the blade to draw his own blood for the ritual, Celine closed her eyes and reached for that bond with everything she had. "Cashin," she called silently, not with words, but with the primal language of wolves. Asterisk, "I choose you. Now and always. Asterisk." The responding surge nearly brought her to her knees. Power flowed between them, amplified and transformed by their reconnection. The mark on her neck blazed with blue-white fire, burning away the dark magic that held her immobile. Victor's eyes widened in disbelief as Celine broke free of his spell, the smoky tendrils dissipating around her. "Impossible," he breathed. "The binding." cannot hold what's already claimed. She finished for him, understanding blooming within her with perfect clarity. I was never yours to take, Victor. Not 3 years ago when Cashin sent me away. Not now. Not ever. Fury contorted his handsome features into something monstrous. Then I'll kill you both, he snarled, lunging with inhuman speed, the ritual blade aimed at her heart. Time slowed as Celine watched the blades approach. She felt no fear, only a strange calm as she raised her hand in a gesture as old as the first wolves. The power flowing through her bond with Cashin gathered in her palm, condensing into blinding light. When the blade met that light, it shattered like glass, fragments sprang across the marble floor. Victor's momentum carried him forward into Celine's waiting grasp. Her fingers closed around his throat, mirroring his earlier assault on her sister. My blood is not yours to claim, she said, her voice resonating with power not entirely her own. My destiny is not yours to dictate. My choice has been made. Behind her, she sensed rather than saw Cashin's approach. The white wolf circled to her side, blood-stained and battle-weary but emanating protective fury. Together they faced Victor, the last Blackthorn heir, stripped of his advantage, his arrogance crumbling into fear. Kill me, and the secret of your bloodline dies with me, he gasped, desperation entering his voice for the first time. Only I know the true extent of the Moonstone power, what you can become if properly guided. Celine studied him thoughtfully, the strange calm still filling her. I don't need your guidance to know what I am, she replied, and I don't need to kill you to defeat you. With deliberate care, she placed her free hand on Cashin's massive head. The connection between them surged, visible now as tendrils of silver blue light entwining around their joined forms. The white wolf pressed into her touch, his eyes never leaving Victor's face. I claim this territory in the name of Ironclaw, Celine announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent ballroom. And I banish you, Victor Blackthorn, from these lands for the crime of violated hospitality. Power rippled outward from her in concentric waves, washing over friend and foe alike. The Blackthorn wolves dropped to their knees, compelled by an authority older than pack law. Even Victor found himself sinking to one knee, his body responding to a command his mind rejected. This isn't over, he hissed, fighting against the compulsion with every ounce of his considerable will. The blood ritual was a perversion of true power, she interrupted, created by those who sought shortcuts to what can only be earned through sacrifice and choice. As if summoned by her words, the manor's grand doors burst open. Framed in the entrance stood a figure few had seen in years, a tall man with Cashin's features, but eyes that glowed with unnatural amber light. Aiden Vare had arrived, his appearance sending shockwaves through both packs. Where Cashin was power barely contained, Aiden was power barely controlled. The Blackthorn blood ritual had transformed him into something between wolf and man, perpetually caught in a half-shifted state that spoke of the curse as much as the gift of Victor's family magic. Brother, Aiden called, his voice rough from disuse. I felt the bond awaken. I felt her claim you. The white wolf growled low in his throat, not threatening but acknowledging. Celine felt Cashin's confusion and joy mingling through their bond, confusion at his brother's appearance, joy at his apparent lucidity. Victor's eyes widened at the sight of Aiden. The vessel survived, he whispered. The first successful hybrid. Not successful, Aiden corrected, advancing into the room with predatory grace. Tortured, torn between forms, between loyalties. His gaze fixed on Celine, recognition flickering in those strange amber eyes. Until I felt your call. The Moonstone heir, reclaiming her mate. Completing the circle not through blood magic, but through choice. Understanding dawned on Celine with sudden, breathtaking clarity. The ritual Victor had attempted was a perversion of something natural, something predestined. The joining of bloodlines was meant to happen, but through mating bonds freely given, not blood magic forcibly taken. Leave, she commanded Victor again, the power behind her words undeniable. Take your wolves and go. The next time you step foot on Ironclaw territory will be your last. For a moment, it seemed Victor might challenge her despite everything. Then, with a snarl of frustrated rage, he backed away. This isn't finished, he promised, his gaze burning with hatred and something like grudging respect. What was foretold must come to pass, one way or another. It already has, Celine replied, her hand still resting on Cashin's head. Just not the way you expected. As Victor and his defeated wolves retreated, Cashin pressed against Celine's side, his massive form a bulwark of strength and protection. Through their rekindled bond, she felt his thoughts as clearly as if he'd spoken, *mine. Always mine, *. Celine turned to face her mate, kneeling to bring herself level with those ice-blue eyes. Always yours, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. As you're mine. Around them, the world fell away. The destruction, the injured pack members, the stunned human witnesses. For one perfect moment, there was only the two of them and the bond that had endured separation, betrayal, and rebirth. But as she embraced her wolf, her mate, her future, Celine couldn't shake the lingering echo of Victor's words. What was foretold must come to pass. Something told her this victory, however sweet, was merely the first battle in a war that had been centuries in the making. And as the white wolf nuzzled into her neck, reclaiming what had always been his, Celine silently vowed they would face whatever came next as they should have faced the first challenge, together, bound by choice rather than obligation. Strength found in vulnerability rather than power. The true mating, the one written in their souls rather than merely marked on her skin, had only just begun. The most profound truth about love isn't found in passion's first bloom, but in the deliberate choice to rebuild what was shattered, and as dawn painted the blood-stained ballroom in gold, Celine understood that the mark she now placed on Cashin's skin wasn't forgiveness for the past, but a promise for a future neither had dared imagine possible. The aftermath of battle transformed the estate from wedding venue to field hospital. Wounded wolves from both packs were treated side by side, those Blackthorn members who had surrendered or been too injured to flee with Victor. Humans who had witnessed the supernatural conflict were being carefully tended to, both physically and mentally, as Maya coordinated with Ironclaw's human liaisons to manage the inevitable fallout. Celine moved through the chaos with newfound authority, her presence bringing calm to the injured and resolve to the shaken. The power that had erupted from her during confrontation with Victor hadn't faded, but rather settled into her bones, becoming part of her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Clay had regained consciousness, his injuries severe but not life-threatening. He sat with Olivia in a quiet corner of the destroyed ballroom, their heads bent together in intense conversation. The betrayal and its consequences would take time to process, to forgive, if forgiveness was even possible. Yet Celine had seen the way Clay's hand covered her sister's, a gesture of support despite everything. Aiden had withdrawn to the shadows after the fighting ended, uncomfortable with the attention his appearance had generated. 3 years of isolation had left him ill-equipped for crowds, for questions, for the shock his half-transformed state provoked in those who remembered him as he was before. And Cashin. Cashin had disappeared into the forest immediately after the battle, the white wolf racing into the trees with a desperate urgency Celine felt echoing through their newly strengthened bond. She understood. The shift from wolf to man was intensely private for him, a vulnerability he shared with few. Now, as dawn lightened the sky from black to indigo to pale lavender, Celine found herself drawn to the hidden cove where everything had changed just hours before. Her body ached from the night's events, fatigue weighing her limbs like lead, yet her mind remained crystal clear, processing the seismic shifts in her reality. The stone steps felt familiar beneath her feet as she descended to the beach. The tide was out, revealing a wider expanse of sand streaked with gold in the early morning light. Waves whispered rather than crashed, gentle in the dawn's stillness. She wasn't surprised to find him there, waiting. Cassian stood at the water's edge, human once more, dressed in simple clothes someone must have brought him. His profile was sharp against the brightening sky, shoulders bearing the weight of leadership and recent battle. When he turned at her approach, exhaustion lined his face, but his eyes, those impossible blue eyes, burned with an intensity that stole her breath. "You came," he said simply, voice rough from the wolf's howls. "You asked me to find you," she replied, stopping an arm's length away. Close enough to touch, far enough to maintain the fragile space between them, a space filled with everything still unsaid. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with potential. The crash of waves provided rhythm to thoughts too complex for immediate words. "I thought I was protecting you," Cassian finally said, gaze shifting to the horizon where sky met sea in a seamless line. "Sending you away, keeping the truth hidden, I convinced myself it was for your safety." "And was it?" she asked, no accusation in her tone, only genuine curiosity. His laugh was hollow, mirthless. "I protected your body at the cost of your heart, your trust, your sense of self." He turned to her fully then, vulnerability naked in his expression. "I failed you in every way that matters." The admission hung in the air between them, raw and transformative. 3 years ago, Celine would have given anything to hear those words. Now, having lived through betrayal and survival, having discovered strength she never knew she possessed, she found they weren't what she needed after all. "We failed each other," she corrected gently. "I believed you abandoned me without reason. I never questioned, never fought, never demanded answers. You shouldn't have had to. Perhaps not. But I should have tried." Celine took a step closer, the distance between them narrowing physically and emotionally. "We were both pawns in a game centuries older than ourselves. Both victims of responsibilities we never asked for." Cassian's gaze traced her face as though memorizing each feature, each subtle change the years had wrought. "What Victor said about your bloodline, about the prophecy, it's true. The Moonstone, Blackthorn, and Ironclaw lines were destined to unite. But not through force or blood magic. Through choice," Celine finished, understanding flowing between them. "Through a bond freely given and received." He nodded, something like wonder creeping into his expression. "When you called to me during the battle, when you reached through our bond, I felt the truth of it. What we have was always meant to be, but could only reach its potential when claimed willingly." The first rays of sun broke over the horizon, bathing them both in golden light. Celine stepped closer still, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, could inhale the scent that had haunted her dreams for 3 long years. "And is that what you want?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "To claim me? To be claimed in return?" The question hung between them, the final barrier to whatever future lay ahead. Cassian's expression shifted, vulnerability replaced by absolute certainty. "I have lived 3 years of hell believing I sacrificed our bond for my brother's life," he said, the words emerging rough with emotion. "I watched you walk away in chains, believing you would never forgive me, that you shouldn't forgive me. I convinced myself that loving you meant letting you go." His hand rose slowly, hesitantly, to cup her cheek. The contact sent electricity coursing through Celine's veins, her wolf rising to meet his touch, recognizing its mate with primal certainty. I was wrong, Cashin continued, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone with exquisite tenderness. Loving you means standing beside you, fighting for you, choosing you every day, in every way, even when, especially when the choice is difficult. Celine leaned into his touch, her eyes drifting closed as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. And if I choose you in return? After everything? Then I would spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of that choice. The simplicity of his answer, the raw honesty behind it, broke something open inside her, the final walls she'd built to protect herself from further hurt. Her eyes opened to find his gaze steady upon her, patient and determined and filled with a love that had never truly died, only been buried beneath obligation and sacrifice. I want to start again, she said, her decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. Not forgetting what happened, but learning from it. Building something stronger from the broken pieces. Hope bloomed across Cashin's features, transforming him from weary warrior to the man she had pledged herself to under the blood moon 3 years ago. How do we begin? In answer, Celine reached for the collar of her shirt, pulling it aside to reveal the mark he had placed at the juncture of her neck and shoulder, the claiming bite that had bound them initially. In the golden morning light, it shimmered with a silvery luminescence that hadn't been there before, transformed by the awakening of her moonstone heritage. We begin with truth, she said, voice steady despite the vulnerability of the moment. With consent freely given. With a marking that goes both ways. Understanding dawned in Cashin's eyes, followed swiftly by wonder and a hunger that made her wolf stir in anticipation. You want to mark me in return? It wasn't a question, but Celine nodded anyway. Among true mates, the bond flows both ways. Equal in strength, equal in vulnerability. I don't want to be your possession, Cashin. I want to be your partner. His breath caught audibly, the significance of her offer clearly understood. For an alpha to bear his mate's mark was unprecedented, a visible symbol of chosen vulnerability, of power willingly shared rather than jealously guarded. There would be consequences, he warned, though his body had already begun to lean toward hers, instinctively seeking closer connection. Questions about my authority, challenges from those who see shared power as weakness. Let them challenge, Celine replied, a smile curving her lips as she stepped fully into his space, her body melding against his with the rightness of puzzle pieces finding their match. We'll face them together. Something wild and joyous flickered in Cashin's eyes. Without warning, he swept her into his arms, spinning her in a circle that left them both breathless with unexpected laughter. When he set her down, his forehead pressed against hers, sharing breath in the most intimate of gestures. Mark me, he whispered, the words both surrender and command. Make me yours as I made you mine. The trust inherent in his request, the alpha wolf baring his throat to his mate, moved Celine beyond words. She placed her hands on either side of his face, drawing him down until her lips could press against the strong column of his neck. This isn't forgiveness, she murmured against his skin, feeling his pulse leap beneath her mouth. It's a promise. As her teeth found purchase against his flesh, completing the circle begun 3 years before, power surged between them, not the desperate, chaotic energy of their battle bond, but something deeper, steadier, a foundation upon which everything else could be built. The rising sun cast their joined shadows across the sand, 2 figures merging into one as waves crashed in rhythmic applause. In that moment of perfect connection, visions flashed through Celine's mind, glimpses of a future unfolding before them, Aiden, slowly healing under their combined care. Olivia and Clay, rebuilding trust shattered by manipulation. A pact transformed by leadership that valued strength found in vulnerability rather than domination. And something else, something that made her gasp against Cashin's skin as she completed the marking. A child with eyes that shifted between blue and brown, carrying the legacy of 3 bloodlines united not through force, but through love. When she finally pulled away, blood staining her lips, Cashin's expression was one of awe and completion. The mark on his neck already shimmered with the same silvery light as hers, visible proof of a bond that could never again be broken. "What did you see?" he asked softly, recognizing the vision shock in her eyes. Celine smiled, pressing her palm against his chest where his heart thundered beneath her touch. "Our future," she replied simply. "And it's beautiful." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as the sun continued its ascent, bathing them both in the light of a new day. "Whatever comes next," he vowed, "we face it as equals. No more secrets. No more sacrifices made alone. No more betrayals," she agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of blood and salt and possibility. Behind them, the cliff path rustled with approaching footsteps, reality intruding on their private communion. The aftermath of battle would demand their attention soon enough, explanations to be given, alliances to be renegotiated, a wedding to be postponed. But for this moment, this heartbeat, there was only the two of them, the alpha who had learned that true strength lay in vulnerability, and the woman who had discovered that the power to shape her destiny had always resided within. He had marked her once to bind her. He had released her to save his brother. And now, as she marked him in return, they forged something entirely new, a bond born not from obligation or tradition, but from choice made with eyes wide open to both past wounds and future possibilities. As the golden morning embraced them, Celine knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever challenges awaited, Victor's inevitable return, the prophecy still unfolding, the legacy of 3 bloodlines converging, they would face them not as alpha and mate, but as equal partners in a story only they had the power to write. In the end, it wasn't about forgiveness or redemption. It was about transformation, about choosing each other again and again, even knowing the cost, about creating something beautiful from the broken pieces of what came before. And in that choice, that deliberate, clear-eyed choice, they found the freedom that had eluded them both for far too long.